So I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over my experience so far and what has transpired and what have I been doing. So for the past couple of weeks, I have had the misfortune of having an injury to my back due to a chiropractor. Thankfully, I'm glad to report that that has been completely almost healed. I still have some issues here and there, but most of it has been healed. I did do physical therapy for it, and it kind of really did help kind of put things at bay. So I have noticed, however, since then that my dizziness has become an issue. Um, so it was a good thing to go through it in a weird way, kind of a blessing in disguise, because for about 4 or 5 weeks, because I was in a lot of pain due to my back, I didn't pay attention to the dizziness so much. And so it kind of taught me that a lot of it is kind of the anxiety feeding off to it, as well as obviously I did still have dizziness. There was still a level of dizziness through the whole thing, but it wasn't as intense. It wasn't as something that would completely disable me. So as I began to realize that, my anxiety has become a lot more stable. I've been able to kind of rationalize a little bit of it. However, vestibular disorders are really linked to the portion of the brain that helps with mood. And so I can still feel, some of those mood issues coming in because of the vestibular issue underlying for me. Since a couple weeks ago, I did have the opportunity to go up to Mayo Clinic to speak to one of their neurologists and then review all my findings and all my records and things that I've done for treatment. And it was a great experience. It was an interesting experience. From it, and from what I was told, they derived at the conclusion that they don't believe I have labyrinthitis or I had labyrinthitis. They think it was mostly a vestibular neuritis issue, which is very similar. One has hearing loss, one doesn't. So it's still the same kind of thing, same family. Because my hearing is back and at 100%. And he said maybe it was labyrinthitis at one point. He really thought from the findings of the VNG that it was mostly a neuritis kind of issue and not a labyrinthitis. So either or, it was a vestibular hit to my ear. And so it was kind of refreshing to just hear it again, that it is something related to the ear. He also did say, though, that what occurs is that typically you have kind of the blunt force trauma to the ear, and it's such a trauma that the vestibular system kind of overreacts, and then the vestibular system doesn't know how to heal itself. And so it begins to have these types of attacks. So it's a vestibular attack. And the word migraine associated with it, he told me kind of what a migraine is and kind of the mechanisms of a migraine. And he basically said the reason why they chose the word migraine is because it has most of the same mechanisms of what a vestibular migraine is. He's like, it is, and because it's treated very closely to a migraine, and some of the treatments that work for migraines work for vestibular migraines, they kind of coincide. But they're very distinctly different. They're two separate diagnoses, different ways of treating them. And he said that although the treatment is kind of overlapping and a lot of things overlap, it's a lot different. And so he had advised that I have vestibular migraines. Therefore, that's why I have headaches. And even though I may not have a headache with the underlying dizziness, it is the spikes and dizziness is part of the vestibular migraines. Another thing he had diagnosed me was with PPPD, which basically is a disorder happening because of the perceivedness of dizziness at the beginning. So basically, he said, because of my labyrinthitis or neuritis, the trauma that occurred in the overstimulation of my vestibular system caused a lot of anxiety, and which is true. Part of the vestibular disorder is part of it is having anxiety. It's all kind of related. So he said that basically the brain is in a continuous state of fear and anxiety, and it overreacts to any stimuli that is being given, and therefore my perception of any of that stimuli comes out as dizziness. So therefore I have a persistent baseline of dizziness. There is no cure for PPD. He said vestibular rehabilitation therapy is the best for that. He said once we get the vestibular migraine under control, he thinks that the PPD will subside as well or get better. So I have 3 diagnoses: PPPD, vestibular migraines, and vestibular neuritis. That's a lot to take in. The good thing about it is that he said, even though I feel like that might be the end of the road and there's no path forward, he's like, it's like the beginning of so many options. He's like, there are so many options of treatment that we didn't even discuss 50% of them. He said it would be too overwhelming to go over the amount of treatment options there are. But he gave me a couple, and he gave me a couple of different paths to consider. And so I am considering them. I'm reviewing them to see what potentially side effects, etc., will come with it. It's reassuring in a way, and then very overwhelming, because one of the things that he had advised me is that there is ways to manage the vestibular disorders, and there's points that can provide relief, and a lot of people can get to 100% healthy, and he assured me that we could get there. So that gives me a lot of hope. However, one thing he said is, that there is a possibility that there wouldn't be 100% recovery, depending on, the individual, and he felt very comfortable saying that I could get there. And he also said that it is something that there's no cure for it. There is no magic pill that can just get rid of vestibular migraines, just like there is no cure for migraines, for regular migraines. He said everybody has to manage them through diet, through lifestyle changes, through medication. There's no miracle drug that will cure it 100%. And so as a migraine patient, he has kind of provided me with hope, but at the same time, he wanted me to understand that it always will be there. And as a long COVID patient, it really does kind of hit home a little bit, because all this started because of COVID for me. And that was the underlying thing that kind of catapulted everything. And so it's a lot. It's overwhelming to take in. There's a lot of hope that comes along with it, but it is something that I am in the midst of processing and reviewing, analyzing, and getting my action plan ready. I don't know what the action plan will look like. I have a couple options on the table. And one of the things that I have developed fear and anxiety about is just medication. In order for me to drink a pill, I have to like psych myself up. I have to review everything, and I've become very hyper aware of all the side effects that potentially can come with some of those pills that are given to me. And so I have to be just an advocate and be graceful to myself, because I think if I were to be given advice to someone else, I would be given a different advice than what I tell myself in my head. And so I kind of have to learn to be a provider of love and grace to my own self, and just like follow my own advice, which is really, really hard. But I will continue with physical therapy, rehabilitation, VRT therapy for vestibular. Then I will also be doing just therapy, mental therapy in general, because I do find it helpful. So this is where I'm at right now. It feels like there's a lot of kind of forks ahead in the road, and I'll have to figure out which one is the best for me, because obviously up until now, the paths that I've had have not really produced anything. So those are my diagnoses. So it's one thing that I found is through the vestibular disorder community has been just amazing in support, and it's like we're all in this together, and we're the only ones that understand how everything is and the symptoms that we have to live with every day and how isolating it can be. And so I have been part of virtual groups, and just like I've met some friends, and I've had virtual friends, and we IM each other, and we share, recipes or treatment options and what we've been doing and who we've been seeing and what they say, and we kind of go back and forth with each other, and we all kind of have the same relationship with the disorder. And so it creates a bonding mechanism to be able to figure out, like, am I normal or am I not normal? And then you find that normal is not really a real word, because there's such a big spectrum of the disorder. So in kind of just summarization, I have been diagnosed with vestibular neuritis, vestibular migraines, and PPPD. There is a lot of options on the table. I will have to decide what's best for me, but as of right now, I wanted to take a quick little time to share that with you. One of the things that I'm still struggling with is the spike on dizziness, which now it makes sense with the vestibular migraines. Obviously the headaches. I've had daily headaches for a long time. They kind of range in the pain scale. They have days where they're on 1 and they're barely even noticeable, and I can function no problem. And then there are days where it grows in intensity and I can't function. And so I'm really looking for those days to stay in the really low, 2s or 1s. But I really would want to have a normalcy back again. Whatever that will be for me in the future, I'm really just looking forward to that. So I hope that your journey is a lot better and that you are continuing to find something. And I just ask that we have grace for each other, because it is a long road and a long journey for us all. Blessings.